because we have to learn shit. Oh, I did it once.
Like a homeless person.
That Ben Franklin was working on a way to make farts smell good.
That sounds made up. I want to get paid for having a mustache and punching people. That's fucking awesome. Hello and welcome to the Church of Awesome.
The church to end all churches.
We'd like to thank you for attending our services today. I am the Archangel Michael. Yeah. Conducting. Presiding we have Cardinal Imam Spencer, son of Hagar.
Peace be upon him.
Also joining us is the Demi-Pope Chris. And Bill. Today we will be discussing the scientific method.
The scientific method was really a revolutionary idea about method. It's about hypothesis testing. Before that, people just wanted to attribute... they would see a phenomenon, they would attribute it to just whatever they could think of and call it a day, and not really worry about the validity of it. They would...
Demons!
You have like the sky gods are angry, and that's why there's no rain, or that's why whatever.
Son of a bitch, I know I should have rain danced.
Exactly, and
Famous last words, right? If only I had rain danced.
well, we were just kind of left to our own cognitive biases, and just not really creating viable models for the world. So the scientific method was developed kind of concurrently in Eastern and Western civilization. It's just kind of the idea of creating models of the world, testing those against how we know the world to be through evidence and logic, and trying to create more and more accurate models of how the world works.
There are 5 steps in the scientific method, right?
Well, the scientific method is more about...
Or is it a way of life?
Yeah, well, it really is. I mean, that sounds corny to say.
Sounds really corny.
For me, whiskey's a way of life.
Yeah, like I've got... Here's kind of an example, and it really is a cycle more than a linear progression.
Yeah.
So you've got define the question, gather information, form hypothesis, perform experiments and collect data, analyze the data, interpret the data and draw conclusions that serve as a starting point for a new hypothesis, and then publish your results, or just get your results out there so that other people can begin it again. And that
replication.
Yeah,
that is one of the most important things that divide science from pseudoscience.
Yeah, well then retest. You go back to the beginning, and either you or someone else retest the hypothesis, and you continue along that cycle, getting more and more refined hypotheses, closer and closer to an actual understanding of the phenomenon that you're trying to explain. So, and nothing is above being questioned, which is one of the things that when the scientific method came along, it's just like, we can ask questions about anything. Nothing is above being questioned. I think it's a cool idea about the scientific revolution. That,
like, for example, I think I heard somewhere that Ben Franklin was working on a way to make farts smell good, because that way people wouldn't have to hold it in.
That sounds made up.
fart cologne.
That has to be made up.
Was it like perfume colonics or something?
Maybe, I don't know. I don't think he ever succeeded.
That'd be awesome if he did, though.
Oh, yeah, it would.
Can you imagine? Because like farts are entertaining enough.
I know.
Like, there's only one downside to a fart.
Yeah.
So if you could eliminate that.
And that's when it's somebody else's.
Look, can
Because
you imagine,
everybody
like,
knows you like the smell of your own.
Yeah, well, if farts actually smelled good and people just loved the fact that you farted, that would be great.
Oh,
that would change the way we live our lives.
It really would. I mean,
these farts smell like schnozberries.
totally change our diets too.
yeah, well,
Red meat and beans all the time. Wait, that's how you eat, right?
That's yeah.
would you imagine that, like, if every time you farted, someone said thank you?
Yes.
Like, oh, thank you.
I'm glad you did that little thing to brighten my day.
Or so it's like, oh, what does that smell? Could someone fart in here?
I love how quick we go from scientific method to farting.
Yeah. Well, we're never all that far away.
As any good podcast is.
So let's go over in a little bit more detail. The scientific method just starts with observation and curiosity. We observe something, a phenomenon in the world that we want to explain or be able to predict when it happens. And we are curious as to why this thing happens. And so we develop hypotheses. Now, a hypothesis must be falsifiable, quantifiable, and have explanatory power. So I've got a couple examples of hypotheses here, and I'm just going to list them here, and then we'll talk about them. Example hypothesis 1. Lightning comes from a sentient being angry at our lack of dedication. Example hypothesis 2. Flies are produced by the rotting of meat. Example hypothesis 3. We are living in a matrix-like simulation, and none of what we perceive is real, and there is no way of knowing. Example hypothesis 4. Sunlight contains all color frequencies of light as components. So some of these hypotheses are more valuable and valid than others. If we do the ones such as we are living in a matrix-like simulation, that hypothesis, it doesn't have any explanatory power really. Some people may perceive it as having, but it's not falsifiable. It's not something that you can go like. If your hypothesis, if someone asks you what would prove your hypothesis false, and there's nothing you can come up with, then it's not really a valid hypothesis.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, the Matrix one, Occam's razor kind of takes that one out, like, right off the bat. It's like, is that really likely to have happened? And even if it did happen, is there anything I can do about it?
Yeah.
And that movie sucked.
You're talking about, because another, it's not one that basically disavows a hypothesis, but parsimony, which is what Occam's razor is about. It's not having a lot of new assumptions included. That makes a hypothesis less likely, but it doesn't rule it out. But like unfalsifiability, that rules out a hypothesis.
Or like pixie dust, like
or having no explanatory power.
Yeah.
Like the Matrix one is kind of the only one that's like that. But like lightning comes from a sentient being angry at our lack of dedication. That has explanatory power. That one, it's not totally unfalsifiable because if you can generate it in a laboratory setting, then if you could control it basically, then you could disprove that hypothesis. But if you're talking about a god with unlimited power and something along the lines of most deities these days, they tend to define themselves out of the realm of falsifiability, and none of the hypotheses that you could generate from those deities would be valid. The flies produced by rotting meat, that was actually a hypothesis that someone actually tested. It's a really good hypothesis because you can say, if we leave meat there to rot, flies, we observe that flies start to, it's maggots first and then flies. And people just assumed that when meat rotted, it turned into maggots, which turned into flies. And we observed that phenomenon, and we're like, okay, so our hypothesis is that if we leave meat there, that it will generate flies.
Yeah, that doesn't posit a super being that defies all description having emotions and taking his anger out on us. It just says, hey, there's meat that we see and we observe in real life, and then flies go to it like we've seen 100 times. That's easy to test, and that's worth pursuing.
And so you can falsify that by you have meat rotting, and then you isolate it from the outside. Basically, you're trying to control for variables. People assumed that the flies came from the meat because they didn't really see flies going to it, depositing eggs and leaving. They just saw the result. So if you isolate that, which some scientists at some time did, he basically proved that that was not the case. It was generally believed, but it turned out to not be the case. The hypothesis was falsified, and then we could move on generating hypotheses from there.
Yeah, I mean, it never occurred to me that flies would come from meat.
Yeah, because, I mean, to us it seems silly, but back then when they were studying this, they just observed the phenomenon and they tried to explain it a couple different ways. So yeah, explanatory power, testability, refutability. Parsimony is a good thing to have, but not necessarily because, we can get into more esoteric things like quantum theory and stuff like that are, not intuitive at all.
Yeah, some things do have complex answers.
Exactly.
That's true.
So I've got a really good quote from Stephen Hawking here from A Brief History of Time. It says, "A theory is a good theory if it satisfies two requirements. It must accurately describe a large class of observations on the basis of a model that contains only a few arbitrary elements, parsimonial, like we're talking about, and it must make definitive predictions about the results of future observations. Any physical theory is always provisional in the sense that it only is a hypothesis. You can never prove it, no matter how many times you get the results of the experiments agree with what your theory is. You can never be sure that the next time the result will not contradict the theory. On the other hand, you can disprove a theory by finding even a single observation that disagrees with the predictions of the theory. So that's where the strength of a theory is. Once you've tested the hypothesis, generated a theory, the amount of times that it ends up being right each time reinforces that theory, that model, and if anything can refute it, but that doesn't happen, then that's a good indicator that theory is sound.
Yeah, I mean, when I hear that, the first thing that pops in my head is, hey, there's the humility and honesty we see in science that we don't see in religion. And to go on to the rest of the quote, it's like I say all the time, the truth should withstand scrutiny. If something is true, then all gathered data will vindicate the truth. If it is not true, then the evidence will show that it is not true.
Exactly.
So there's no reason to be scared of more evidence. You should always be seeking new information because we have to learn shit and expand our minds and see to get a real grasp of the world around us rather than just sit in our echo chambers and little boxes and pretend to be satisfied with idiotic notions from thousands of years ago.
Because that's often how science progresses, is that you have a theory that you think explains everything, but as you're gathering data, you start to see something that is not fitting with the established theory. Like if we were using Newtonian mechanics to describe the movement of the planets, but that only worked up until a certain point. I mean, I think it was just observations on the further out planets that you see that it didn't quite work. It was off by a little bit. And we don't just say like, oh, then that means that Newtonian mechanics is just shit and doesn't work.
You're stupid for thinking that.
But then you have Einstein's theories to kind of refine it to make it more accurate and account for things that Newtonian mechanics didn't account for.
Yeah, that's why Richard Dawkins calls science a self-correcting endeavor.
Exactly.
I like that.
Yeah, because if we get hypotheses that, they may be provisional hypotheses that last for a while, and then, on closer scrutiny, or like we refine our instruments so we're able to gather better data, or what have you, we're able to, refine things and make them more exact and get a better model of what our universe is. So we have our hypotheses, we test them, and the way that we test them is not trying to prove that we're correct. We basically use logical deduction and say, if my hypothesis is true, I can expect the following things to occur, and we test to see if those things occur, which shouldn't be difficult because our hypothesis is based on observations that we've made already. So that should be kind of a no-brainer. But then we test if any of the following things happen, my hypothesis is false. And we go about trying to falsify our hypothesis. And if it withstands all attacks on it from every angle we can think of, then we accept it as provisionally true. And experiments must be repeatable, and not just by you, by anybody who uses the tools that you outline and the procedure that you've described. They should get the results, and they should not be able to falsify your hypothesis.
Yeah, that is something that is so key to me, is being able to replicate it. I'm reminded of did you ever see the episode of Simpsons where Stan Lee was on it? Where he's basically just hanging out in the comic book store, and he's totally crazy, but he's hilarious because he's Stan Lee. And like at the end of the episode, he's He's going, don't make me angry. Oh, I did it once. He's basically trying to turn into the Hulk. And every time it's like, yeah, this one lab did it and no one else could do it. Oh, I did it once.
Yeah. Yeah, because, I mean, and no matter how... It's chaos theory. No matter how much you try and control your environment, you try to isolate all the variables, there could be something that creeps in that throws off your results entirely. Yeah. But it's not likely to throw off everybody's results in the same way every time it's tried.
Well, whenever you're dealing with any kind of result, you're dealing with some kind of confidence interval of, if you're saying, what's the likelihood of this outcome happening by random chance?
Yeah, we were talking about that before with the statistics thing, because that's when you're analyzing the data, and that's where the statistics come in. So you get like this is, and especially the more times that your hypothesis is validated and survives attacks, the more likely it is to be true. But we never say
100% this is the way it is.
A lot of people have the idea that a theory graduates to a scientific law after it's been tested enough, but that's not just the way it is. It's theories become more and more established over time just because they continue to fit the observations that we make, and laws are just things that are mathematically that are mathematically true in a logically consistent way. They're not the same thing. It's apples and oranges.
Well, remember, evolution is only a theory, and
exactly.
God makes laws, so Trump, bitches. Like, well, there's just, you got so much wrong in a very short period of time.
Well, people think that laws supersede theories, but it's like, it kind of not. It's just apples and oranges.
Well, yeah, the laws of Narnia don't trump the theories of proven scientific facts.
Yeah, because people try and, people just, it's kind of understandable that they would like, laws in common everyday speech, the law is something that, we can change it, but generally we just accept what the laws are.
Yeah, and laws take a lot of effort to create and a lot more to amend or to repeal.
Yeah.
I think some of it's the way people use the word theory in everyday speech. It's like, well, I got this crazy harebrained theory that,
Yeah.
Yeah, like a conspiracy theory, JFK assassination. It's the.
Oh, no, that's provable.
I believe that's called an equivocation, where you have the denotative meaning of a word and the connotative meaning of a word.
Yeah.
Where you have what the word theory actually means and how it's used in common parlance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that would be the official name of the logical fallacy they're making there. It's like, it's only a theory.
Ding! Equivocation.
Yeah, because people really, it's not even a hypothesis, what they're saying. They're just saying, like, it's a pre-hypothesis, but it's easier to say theory. Theory is just easier.
Yes.
It rolls off the tongue.
I was going to say verbal diarrhea, but yours works too.
Yeah, that too.
And now, sit back and relax while we commune with the spirits.
Looking at my clock, it appears to be Suntory time. So I'm drinking the Yamazaki 12-year-old single malt Japanese whiskey, and it is quite delicious.
Today I am communing with the Macallan 12-year-old. A lot of times when we get too into single malts, we fall in love with the little guys, the little independent distillers, but I gotta say, for being one of the big giants, it actually is quite tasty.
And I'm communing with the spirit of jealousy and bitterness because I'm on call for work and can't drink right now.
So what are you communing with over there?
A can of black beans.
Like a homeless person.
Uh-huh.
When we generate hypotheses, you could actually consider the God hypothesis as, just like I was saying, lightning comes from a sentient being angry at our lack of dedication. That's a hypothesis. And back in the day, before we had this scientific method to kind of systematically narrow down our view of the world to parse it down to just the facts, a lot of people just didn't want to have the nagging questions, and so they would create a God to fill in those gaps, to say, all of these things that I don't understand are because of this God character that takes care of everying else.
Is it like the sonic screwdriver?
Yeah, exactly. It's like anything I don't feel like explaining. Yeah, it's It's taken care of by this thing.
For those of you who don't know what the sonic screwdriver is, that's from Doctor Who. I swear to God, I've only seen one episode, but I know what a sonic screwdriver is. It's basically your plot hole cover-up device, right?
Yeah, so you have this God hypothesis, but it's not a good hypothesis because it's like our example with the lightning God, that you've narrowed God down enough that he's testable. But the gods that are usually generated are they're trying to explain what's left over. So you have this incredible shrinking God thing that you attribute all these things to God, and as you analyze them and understand them scientifically, the power and explanation that this God is needed for is, in a smaller and smaller domain.
Isn't the fact that we're moving the goalpost on this, or they're moving the goalpost on this, pretty much indicate that God has become obsolete? Like God used to be in the mountains, then once we climbed the mountains, he wasn't there. Then God used to be in the sky, then we invented airplanes and found he wasn't there. Then God was in space, and then we've done space exploration. And now he's like, I think in another dimension, right? Yeah. So it's ding, moving the goalpost.
Yeah.
It's making it so that you never can falsify or never really quantify it. And
they're just using the God of the gaps, because there's always going to be stuff that we don't know, because
True.
Hypotheses and theories are good because they generate more hypotheses and theories. They're
not omniscient gems. So you go, oh, well, figured everything out.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, science doesn't know everything, or else it would stop. Mm-hmm. And there's always going to be more to figure out. And that's a strength of science.
And I think the real problem with religion as an answer to these unknowable questions is that it stops you from looking.
Yes, it murders your intellectual curiosity.
Yeah, and there's a bias against curiosity. They say curiosity killed the cat, and all that stuff. And curiosity is one of the things that makes us human. It's how you learn. If there's no curiosity, then you're just an automaton going through like blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, isn't that kind of one of the liabilities of having like a highly functioning brain?
Yeah,
is being curious. Like animals, they kind of look to eat and fuck, right? Like. And maybe do a couple other tasks.
Yeah, you don't see. I mean, like, you don't see a whole lot of animals being curious.
I've never seen a cat astronaut. Ever.
Catstronaut?
No, they use monkeys.
Well, yeah, because we put them there.
Yeah.
Don't give them credit for our work.
And a dog once, Laika.
Yeah.
Or Laika. One of the saddest stories ever.
I know.
It doesn't have a soul. Don't worry about it.
Dogs don't have souls.
Still feel bad for them.
Yeah.
They just sent him up into space to die. No plan of ever bringing him back.
Yeah.
Oh, they didn't even intend to bring him back?
No, they sent a dog out into space.
To see if he would survive.
Yeah. And to take any weight up into space, it's expensive and difficult. Right. So they, just send him up there.
They didn't plot a return course?
No plot a return course. No food for the trip. It's just
oh my God, what a bunch of bastards.
Yeah, so he orbited until he starved, and then he burned up on reentry. So it's like...
Oh, that's horrible.
Yeah, it really is. It really is. See, that's where, because you have the scientific method, which has these hypotheses.
See, that's
and
what
how you
science does. It kills puppies.
No, the thing is that
that's
there's also...
why it's evil.
Because there's ethics involved, too. I mean, science by itself...
Apparently not in Russia. Whoever launched that shit out.
Because, science in and of itself doesn't have ethics. We have to be in charge of the ethics. Because we can have these hypotheses that are testable, but the tests that we'd have to do to prove them would not be ethical to do.
Yeah, that's a good point to mention that, like, using words like good and evil are kind of useless because they're subjective. To say that guns are evil is kind of stupid because it needs a human operator.
Exactly.
Science is the same thing. To say science is evil.
That's the guns don't kill people, I kill people.
Right.
You can't do a scientific study about guns are evil because it's not a falsifiable hypothesis. It doesn't have any explanatory power. You have to say like guns, like having a gun in the home makes you more likely to kill someone in your own home than an intruder or something like that. That's a study that you can do.
Uh-huh.
And then you make the value judgment based on the outcome of that study.
Yeah, I wonder if they'll think guns are so evil, when the U.S. Marshal is capturing the top 10 fugitives and or someone's defending your life or property. Guns are evil. They're all bad. Take them away.
And I think I want to throw in here, that's when we start dealing with studies like Chris suggested of testing whether having a gun in your home makes you more likely to end up killing somebody on accident or what, that's not something that ethically we can study with experimental research. We can only do correlational research, which we cannot prove causation. We can only say this makes you more likely to have this happen.
Well, yeah, because the people in your house more likely going to be people you care about and not strangers.
Yeah,
So-
but I mean, to do an actual scientific thing, what you would have to do is you'd have to randomize the houses, put guns in random houses and not in others, control for other variables.
Have intruders go into all of them and see which people are more likely to kill their own people on accident.
Exactly. So, and you can't do that. You can only do observational, correlational research. You can only see what has happened, and you can try and draw conclusions from that, but you can't test them.
Yes.
So, again, the theories that you get from that kind of research, they're not nearly as strong as experimental research.
Yes. It's like the smoking causes cancer thing. There's never been any experimental data to say that smoking causes cancer. However, the correlational data is so off the charts, But that does carry a little bit less weight because you can't say...
Because it's a self-selecting group.
It is a self-selecting group.
And it always... You can't just have people born and say, like, okay, pick a number, like draw a number from this lottery. Now, if you had an odd number, you start smoking now. If you have an even number, don't ever smoke.
We're gonna put a bunch of guns in houses and go in there and see if you get shot.
Yeah, so there's a lot of science that we just can't do.
Shot. It's for science.
So I mean, people will say like, science is evil, science is unethical. It's like, well, it's not unethical, but it can't be ethical because it's a process that has nothing to do with value judgments. How we use science is used as a tool by us to try and explain the universe, but there's some stuff that's going to be ethically out of bounds and always will be.
And that's where it's up to the scientists to maintain good ethics.
Yeah, they have to police themselves.
Most institutions of learning, universities, that kind of thing, have ethics review boards to make sure that in every case, particularly when human subjects are involved, that they're following all kinds of ethical guidelines, such as no long-standing harm, nothing that's gonna totally fuck somebody up.
Yeah, I mean, like the Nazis were doing science.
Yeah,
and they got amazing results.
And in this country, we were doing the same kind of stuff with the Stanford
prison experiment.
Prison experiment. Yeah, the Tuskegee.
Yeah, Tuskegee.
There are lots.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the Japanese are doing it with the Chinese during World War II as well.
Yeah,
and I mean, a lot of those scientists were, prosecuted on that. But, the scientific knowledge that we gained from those, it was useful, but it wasn't worth the cost.
Yeah.
Or we deemed it as not worth the cost.
Yes.
So a lot of times we like to celebrate the heroes in science, which is a good thing. Like we have our...
Let's hold up smart people and celebrate them. Because...
I mean, you have your Stephen Hawking, your Einstein.
Well, Niels Bohr cured cancer.
What are you talking about?
I don't know. Deification of scientists.
Well,
Kim Kardashian did the same thing.
Yeah. Well,
but she did it before it was cool.
Well, we have these scientists that we like to celebrate because they had a hypothesis that was so off the wall, but it actually turned out to be true. And we like the underdog story, the guy who, they're positioned as guys that took on the scientific establishment and won. But those are way more the exception than the rule. Most of progress comes from just incremental improvement, that you get that cycle that we talked about, that you have your hypothesis tested, generate more hypotheses, which other people test, and the entire field as a whole advances slowly, step by step, experiment by experiment, hypothesis by hypothesis.
Yeah, people like hearing, and especially people want taught to their children through textbooks a dramatic narrative. But what they end up doing is making these people into caricatures and transforming it into melodrama. Making it, there's not, it tells just completely fabricated story, often getting facts dead wrong, sometimes making shit up, but also making it so it just loses all contact with reality, which ironically is what you want to do with science.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you turn it into a story so that it's more entertaining. And I guess we're just better at remembering stories and stuff like that. Like you're much more likely to remember the Washington cutting down a cherry tree than you are his surveying career or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, like, you don't have to have, a beginning, middle, and end, and, denouement and climax and all this stuff. When you're talking about some guy shooting atoms through gold sheets and stuff, I was like, look, he did these experiments.
Like a good climax?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's true, because, I mean, like, you can remember that atoms are mostly empty space, but then that gold foil experiment, if you think of that story, that resonates with you more. And so I can understand why people like that, but it is a misrepresentation of what science is. It's kind of a romantic...
Right, but to say things like Washington crossed the Delaware and actually chopped down the cherry, like Susan B. Anthony made the American flag. I'm sorry, who am I thinking of?
Betsy Ross.
Betsy Ross. That's like I always mix those two up.
I know Susan B. Anthony made those coins, right?
Yeah, the little silver
she
dollar
cured
thing.
cancer, stupid.
That's right.
Betsy Ross had fucking nothing to do with making the flag,
Well, and especially the flag that we have now.
Yeah.
You see pictures of her sewing the thing with 50 states, 50 stars, and you're like,
yeah. Close. 13.
It's like, how did she guess that we were going to have 50 states?
It's a nice round number.
She was
just stop there.
Yeah, she was a prophetess. That's
why for some reason the Dakotas are split into two, but California is one big ass piece of shit state.
Yeah.
Well, that was a tangent. I'm like, what the fuck are we talking about?
Yeah. But we're also talking about why does religion hate science? And does science hate religion? I mean, science doesn't respect religion as a science because it's not. It's just, it isn't a science. It doesn't make scientific hypotheses. It's not performing science. There's no... in science, we acknowledge our assumptions and we, try and systematically remove our biases and all that stuff. And religion does just entirely the opposite. Religion would like to have the legitimacy of science, and so a lot of times they try and kind of use some of these scientific sounding things, or like you have things like creation science, which is just religion trying to put on a mask of scientific legitimacy.
Yeah, so let's take the things from the scientific community, that support our cause, and ignore the mountain of evidence against it.
Yeah, and well, they just take the scientific method and turn it backwards. They start with the conclusion, and they try and work backwards to find to either cherry pick or use whatever methods they can to isolate evidence that confirms their worldview, and then just working backwards. So it's
we'll see if you found this watch on the beach.
What's funny is it reminds me of the Book of Revelation. One of the things in the Book of Revelation it talks about how Satan is always doing things to make duplicates of what's right, but they're obviously not right.
counterfeits.
Yeah. And, like down to the smallest detail, he'll make something like, instead of a temple, he'll make a casino or a broth or something like that. Like, you can mirror match almost all of these things, right?
Temple and a brothel. They're so the same thing.
Yeah, one's useful.
Yeah. We all know which one.
When you hear about creation science, or the Institute for Biblical Study, you're like... you're doing because science came first, and set up something like that. I mean, superstition did come first, but
well, as Neil deGrasse Tyson says, there's no history of scientists banging on the church door and trying to get churches to teach science, but the other way around, you get that quite often.
Hypocrisy.
Well, and it's just because that science is threatening to religion. Science is the one that's shrinking that incredible shrinking God.
Yeah.
Yes. I love that video I saw recently called Internet, Where Religion Goes to Die.
It really should. And the more you expose yourself to facts and research and science, the less likely you are to resort to superstition. I mean, curiosity killed the gods.
Yes, I like that. Curiosity killed the gods. Yeah, before if you were looking for... heresy or apostate literature or facts, you had to go into a library and maybe go into the restricted section or something to find things like, I don't know, Brigham Young's journal discourses and the stuff that's very inconvenient stuff.
Well, and like the lives of the popes and stuff like that.
Now, everywhere you can find it so easily.
Yeah, I mean, now the information is readily available to anyone.
Yeah, I mean, that's what took me out. That's what made me lose my faith, was the ability to look up stuff, to read stuff for myself. Because before, I was just, it's how it is. It's black and white, and God's laws are perfect, and it's not my place to question it. And then once you see claims that are made by the religions, and you go, well, I can see clear as day, black and white, that's not the case. I wonder what else I've been lied to about. And down goes the house of cards.
Yeah, because you're taught to trust, to not be curious, to not do science. Because
we have all the answers, so why would you want to go anywhere else?
Exactly.
You can't trust men. Men were created by God. God is superior.
Yeah, like I said, nothing is above being questioned. So you should question everything, be curious, investigate.
Yes.
I mean, that's how we naturally are. Religion just crushes that in us.
We try and we try and paint science as this hero on a white horse. There are a lot of bad scientists out there. The case that comes to mind is the guy who, like, his name escapes me right now, who attempted to say that the MMR booster that we give kids was causing autism. And then within months, everybody was going, well, this is piece of shit research. Every problem that you try and avoid, he was ignoring because he really wanted to prove this.
Well, and as it turned out later, he had a financial stake in it because he was making an alternative, a single dose vaccine, which he owned, and so he stood to make millions of dollars. And I wouldn't say it's a failing of science. I mean, you have to hold these people ethically accountable. He wasn't doing science.
No, it was a failure of the scientist. But what I'm saying is, whenever this comes into the question, everything. Even when it's science, you question every scientific thing that comes up.
Exactly.
Too.
That's why it needs to be replicated. And so he sent it out to, he wouldn't release the stuff, which is already a red flag.
I did it once.
Yeah, exactly. I did it once. But, he's basically just the most evil motherfucker I can think of, because it's just like, okay, so you are going to subject children to disease for profit.
Basically.
Yeah. Okay, you're an evil motherfucker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now you got a whole shitload of crazy-ass famous people, I won't mention any names, who continue to promote this bullshit, even though it was refuted by the scientific community a dozen years ago. Well, this is where, why a lot of institutions of higher learning give tenure to professors. It's supposed to be a safety net to ensure unbiased research, because if your job's at stake and you come out with something that's against the way that the institution feels, you might be in fear of losing your job because you said something they didn't like, and so they give these people tenure. So it's like, you know what? Even if you say something that we totally don't like, we can't fire you for it. Which certain religious universities named after certain polygamous former leaders of religions decide not to give any of their professors tenure.
Really? I didn't know that.
For that very reason. So they can fire you for whatever the fuck they feel like.
Well, that's pretty much their MO.
Yeah.
Now, when you've got an institution that claims things like Book of Abraham, for example, or trying to archaeologically prove the Book of Mormon happened, no, these are not people who are interested in scholarship. And now, get ready to be irrationally pissed off, because we're going to be talking about our fatwas of the week. Today I will be declaring a fatwa against unnecessary left turn arrow signals. I have to go into one of these stupid things every day. Now, I understand if you have heavy traffic, and sometimes it's difficult to wait it all the way out till the light turns red and then you turn left. I get that, and sometimes it's necessary, but on a street where most of the time that it's not busy to justify that, it's irritating. And I have to do it every morning for like at least 2 or 3 minutes, just sit there for no reason when I easily could go. It makes me angry. And I can only think of, off the top of my head, 2 left turn signals that I run into regularly, and both of them are that same stupid situation where it's totally unnecessary. And what's even more maddening is when it wasn't before, then all of a sudden is like, wow, I never had to wait for this crap before, and now I always have to wait for this crap anymore.
Today I'm going to declare jihad on the American sports fan. Now, I myself am an American and a sports fan, but by no means your typical American sports fan. Specifically, our country's obsession with American football is just retarded. It's not that good of a sport. It's always anticlimactic. The games are never all that good. And they're just getting so pansy-ass about protecting the quarterback. And you know what? Now you got a generation of quarterbacks that can't take a fucking hit. Before they knew how to take a hit, until they'd prepare themselves for it. And when they take a hit, they wouldn't get hurt. And now they give them these huge-ass helmets and these big shoulder pads, and dudes just like rocket themselves at people, and they can't take a hit. On contrast, you take a sport like hockey, which is quite exciting. It's low scoring, which is why Americans hate it, but it's super exciting. And my suggestion, go to a game. Just go to one. Tell me what you think.
Fucking Canadians.
You'll see some real men
You will.
whomping on each other.
You will, and you'll see a really exciting game, and even though the score at the end of the game is 3-1, it's amazing how much more exciting a score is when it might be the only one of the game.
Oh man, hockey is so much better than American football for lots of reasons. One, I mean, I don't know anything about sports. I don't watch sports, but I just walked past TV while the hockey game was on, and this dude on the Ducks, I think it basically is probably their enforcer, just this dude with a mustache, and he's just beating the crap out of people.
Yes.
I'm like, I want to get paid for having a mustache and punching people. That's fucking awesome.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I would take that job, yeah. Yeah, it sounds pretty good. My fatwa is on the aforementioned Andrew Wakefield. I already explained why. He's a douchebag. He poisons children for money, and there is no profanity sufficient to label him
Boner bunning dick fart fuck face.
times
That's ramming Uncle Fucker.
times dog shit taco times.
Ass rag motherfucker. I'm sorry, what?
Because there's a lot of people that are
Huh?
evil that you're like, yeah, that's a pretty evil thing to do, but sometimes you're like, okay, he may, believe this and this, he may see the world this way, and he's just acting within those parameters. But this one, when you can prove, it's like, he falsified research to make money, he had a controlling interest, there's no way to interpret that as anything but totally evil.
Yeah, there's no nobility and poisoning children.
Yeah. And he continues even in the face of being disbarred, this evidence has come out, and he still continues and still receives support. So, fuck that guy in his ear.
We'd like to thank you for joining us today at the Church of Awesome. We will now leave you with the gift of tongues. Come on. Hang on. Okay, go.
And I think you're single.
Yes.
When in doubt, hot Mexican girls.
You're stupid for thinking that.
There's only one downside to a fart.
Yeah.
Quit anytime I want. See, that's what science does. It kills puppies. That's why it's evil.
The comments made by the hosts and other participants are the opinions of the individuals and not those of any corporate entity. All data and information provided in this program is for informational purposes only. The Church of Awesome makes no representations as to accuracy, completeness, currentness, suitability, or validity of any information in this program and will not be liable for any errors, omissions, or delays in this information or any losses, injuries, or damages arising from its display or use. All information is provided on an as-is basis. If you like what you've heard in today's sermon, come visit us at churchofawesome.com or follow us on Twitter at COA Podcast.